You're listening to the Travis Makes Money podcast presented by GoHighLevel.com. For a free 30-day trial of the best all-in-one digital marketing software tool on the planet, just go to GoHighLevel.com/Travis. What's up, moneymakers? Welcome back to the Travis Makes Money podcast. Today, I'm giving you a sneak peek of this week's episode of my main show, Travis Makes Friends, a podcast all about the most valuable asset that we have in our lives, our relationships. So whether we're talking about your network, your marriage, your friendships, or even your relationship with yourself, these conversations are designed to help you grow, connect, and level up in all areas. I've sat down in person with everyone from world-class athletes and entertainers to best-selling authors, entrepreneurs, and even former presidents. And you're going to love the snippet from this week's episode. So take a listen, and if you're feeling it, go check out the full conversation over on Travis Makes Friends. Let's get into it.
There is a craft to broadcasting.
Ken Coleman, he is a commentator, has his own show, The Ken Coleman Show,
which airs live on WCGO every Monday through Friday.
I'm not saying this with any kind of, pride or arrogance, but I was one of the first people, to get in this whole thing. I was the only personality with radio experience. So he was like, give Coleman an hour-long show right before me each day.
You got to follow your heart here, Esmeralda. Step
I don't
into
think
this.
it's a better product. I think it's a more accessible product. If you were to truly grade some of the biggest podcasts that are out there, and I'm not saying every one of them, and I'm not going to say anything so people can just let their imagination run, but some of these, if you were to grade them, just their interview ability, it's not impressive.
If you had to be forced to cut out every other thing that you do, can only do one thing that you do, what would you want to do? What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Travis Makes Friends podcast. Today, I am making friends with the one and only Ken Coleman. Ken, what's up, man? Welcome to the show.
Good to be with you, Travis. Thanks for having me.
Oh, yeah, of course, dude. It's really a miracle that we both made it in this morning. Yeah. There's snow on the ground in Nashville, Tennessee.
Yeah, I mean, and I thought it was a nothing burger based on the amount of snow on my front porch, but it's cold here. That's the problem. It's cold, and I don't have a vehicle made for that.
That's right. Yeah, it's when you don't expect it.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
It just reminds me how grateful I am to live in the South.
Yeah, that's very fair.
Yeah.
I came from Vegas, and
oh my gosh.
Typically Vegas, though, it gets way colder than people think it gets.
Yeah.
People come visit me in January, February, and they don't bring a coat. And it's like, okay, but it's 40 degrees outside.
Yeah.
And it's windy,
Right.
and it's overcast.
Right.
It still gets really cold.
Yeah.
But for whatever reason, February's been super mild. So when I left home, it was like 73 and sunny.
Oh,
and then pulled up in Nashville.
Transport me to that, please.
But we made it. We're here.
Good.
First question I have for you is, how does one achieve the hair look that you've been able to achieve for so long?
One just goes with what one is given.
That's all it is.
Yeah. I don't do
No
anything.
additional, nothing.
Yeah, I don't do anything special.
I was hoping for a
I let
secret.
it do its thing. I have a very quick process.
I was hoping for a secret,
I would say
man.
good hair product is essential.
Yeah.
When you have wavy kind of, that kind of hair. But I've always gotten comments on it. But it's you go with what you have, and it only takes me about 3 or 4 minutes.
I've never really thought about it. Just always had hair until recently. I started not having hair. I was like,
yeah, well, that's
like,
a thing.
oh no,
no, that's a thing. That's a thing. The hairline recedes.
Yeah,
It gets thin in certain spots.
Yep, up here, the little crown area.
Yeah, I'm not above dealing with that.
Yeah, I'm not either.
Yeah, I'm going to deal with it. I've just got too many other priorities right now. Like, that's way down the list, but sure.
It's one of the interesting things about the podcast is it puts you in touch with just random people. And we had this hair transplant doctor reach out, and I didn't get a free hair transplant. That would have been nice. But I did get a free PRP treatment to come out and do a whole interview an episode with their team and stuff. And so they shot up my head with a bunch of...
Did it work?
Well, I'm about 2-3 months in right now, but short answer is yes. There's a bunch of baby hairs growing in the regions that were escaping quickly, faster than I was hoping
Good.
that
No,
they
I've
would,
heard
so.
about that as well.
Yeah, it was pretty
fascinating.
effective. Yeah.
I think if I just, in my mind, if I'd keep delaying, the technology and the advancements are going to get so much better.
Exactly.
I'm trying to avoid as much pain as possible.
That's what I told my wife. I was like, I don't want to be in a position where I can't make the decision to have hair when I feel like we're right around the corner from it being very optional. like 10 years from now, where it's like it's no longer whatever 15 grand for a transplant or something. They've come up with some new technology that
that's my
just enables everybody to have something at their house that they put on once a day, and then they have hair all of a sudden.
And you've got enough on your face that you can do. I can't even do that.
The beard.
Yeah, if I tried to grow a beard, I'd look like a dog with mange. Like there'd be a spot here, and it's just not. It's not a pretty thing at all. How did we get on this topic?
Yeah.
Oh, that's right. You asked.
Purposeful.
Sure. All right. Great. Thank you.
We got to give the people what they want, Ken.
Okay.
People want to know.
Yeah. I don't even know what the hair looks like today. I came in here a little bit on two wheels.
Frazzled. Yeah. Well, thanks for taking the time to do this, man. I was looking back in the archives and realized we had a conversation on the show 2018.
Oh, wow.
2018, 2019.
Yeah.
And doing some sort of book promo, I'm sure. But things look a little bit different around Ramsey HQ since that time period. But you've been around for the whole thing. How come?
The simple answer is because I'm supposed to be here. I mean, I'm not a guy that just sticks around to stick around. I love change. I love growth. But this is the longest I've been anywhere employed. So I started here in June of 2014.
Wow.
So as we sit here today, coming up on 11 years.
No kidding.
And the answer to that is that I believe in being present. I believe, in being where your feet are. And I think your heart leads you and your feet should follow. And I'm where I'm supposed to be. I don't know what the next 2 years, 5 years, 10 years looks like in any area of my life. Certainly this, but I mean, that's why I'm still here.
What brought you here in the first place?
God and Dave Ramsey.
Okay.
It came out of nowhere. It was not something that I was actively pursuing. We had conversations maybe a year and a half, 2 years prior to me actually joining the team. I'd met with some of the executives here because I was friends with them.
Okay.
And we talked about this idea of, having a super host or a Ryan Seacrest type in the building. And at the time I was, pursuing, full hosting and broadcasting and television and radio and was doing it. And so it was an idea that was discussed, but it wasn't the right timing. And so I thought that the door was closed. It was a fun conversation and, not high stakes, low stakes. And then about a year later, I got the call and Dave had brought me up in a meeting. They were launching a new conference. He said, we don't have anybody that can host it. He knew my work. I'd done a lot of stuff with him. And then they said, is there something more for him too here? And so that's how that conversation came about.
So you were just doing independently?
Well, I had my own show in Atlanta and had my own business. And so was entrepreneur,
Sure.
Bootstrapping it. And,
what was that business?
We were selling sponsorships to large live events because I was in the live event business as a host.
Gotcha.
So
okay.
that was the day job, and then I had
going vertical.
I had the Ken Coleman show. Was doing that Monday through Friday drive time.
Wow.
On a radio station. So was pursuing and actively doing radio.
Was it similar content?
I'd say similar, but it was a little broader because it's talk radio.
Yeah, sure.
So it was a little broader than as far as the content that I'd be talking about, but still in the area of, the concept behind the show was you get enough political talk radio and news during the day on drive time. How about some content that makes you better?
Yeah.
So, we would talk parenting, marriage, business, leadership, entrepreneurship. It was across the board. A little bit of cultural, politics, but not much.
Yeah.
And it was received very well because it was kind of a breath of fresh air. So I'd have a guest on, or I would do talk segments. It was a true talk show.
Sure. Did you have a general opinion on podcasting and podcasters at that time, being a radio host?
Well, yeah, I thought it was absolutely going to be the new format. I was already doing it. So if you go back, before I was doing the Ken Coleman Show on radio, I was with John Maxwell's company, and there was a large conference called Catalyst, and I launched the Catalyst podcast. And this was when people had iPods.
I was going to say that's like early stages podcasts.
Yeah, and I'm not saying this with any kind of, pride or arrogance, but I was one of the first people to get in this whole thing.
Right.
I was reading a magazine called Fast Company, and there was one of these little blurbs on the side of the page about that big.
Yeah.
And it was talking about a new idea called podcasting, where you did audio on your own, you uploaded it to Apple, and people could play it on their iPods. And again, this is when iPods were like revolutionary, and you had a little circle with your
talk
thumb,
of the town. Yeah.
and if you bought it, you got a whole U2 album. Like, it was a big deal, and you're laughing about it now. That's what's funny about it, is the crew's laughing, but like, that was unbelievable. It's you get the new iPod, you get U2's new album already uploaded.
I do remember that, because I remember thinking that like my iPod got hijacked, because I didn't know that was a thing. And then all of a sudden I looked at my, and we were, so I grew up in a very fundamentalist Baptist background.
Yeah.
We were not allowed to listen to anything other than like gospel music.
Too. Yeah.
And so that got put on my iPod, and then I got in trouble for it. I was like, I didn't do it. It wasn't like, really, music. This magically got onto your iPod.
Yeah,
like,
absolutely.
Actually, it did, yes.
So I went to the Maxwell folks. We were contracted. My wife and I were doing our sponsorship sales business, and I was on my own because John had sold the company at that point. But I was still doing some stuff with the Catalyst Conference, and I got this idea, and I said, I'm trying to make it in broadcasting. I think I can talk these guys into me launching a podcast, and I interview all these big names from the Christian leadership space.
Okay.
Well, they went for it. So we launched the Catalyst podcast, I want to say in 2007, 2008.
Wow.
So to answer your question,
early stage.
So here I am in where I was just telling you I'm in about 2011, 2012. So I knew that podcasting was going to be a viable alternative. It already was.
Right.
It has since gone bananas.
Insane.
Because technology's just made the entry, the door for entry so much easier. But
well, and ultimately, a better product is going to win in the long run. And I think a podcast is just a better product for the consumer. Just it's on demand.
I'll push against that because I'm a traditional broadcast guy, and I will always be a traditional broadcast guy because I grew up listening to talk radio, and Rush Limbaugh was a hero, and I remember watching Peter Jennings, and Tom Brokaw and Dan Rather. So certainly my age is a part of this. I would say this: I don't think it's a better product. I think it's a more accessible product. I still think you can do great traditional TV.
Sure.
I
Yeah, no, I
now at the end of the day, the medium has to adjust to the user.
Right.
And that's what we're seeing happen. But I appreciate what you're saying, but there's a lot of really crappy podcasts.
Oh yeah, no, I don't mean.
I mean, like, I would say the majority of podcasts are crap.
Well, the numbers would also agree with you on that.
Yeah, but even some of the big podcasts.
That's very.
If I were to grade it by broadcast standards, and I mean this, I'm popping off right now, but I don't care.
Go for it.
And again, none of this matters per se, but. Because it's like the audience wants what they want. But if you were to truly grade some of the biggest podcasts that are out there, and I'm not saying every one of them, and I'm not going to say anything so people can just let their imagination run. But some of these, if you were to grade them, just their interview ability.
Oh,
it's not impressive.
Atrocious in some cases.
But again, let me also say that doesn't matter. And I am fine with people going where they want to go. But I do want to say that, like, there is a craft to broadcasting. There is a craft to interviewing.
Yeah.
And it's gotten watered down. That's all I want to say.
Yeah, no, that's very fair, because there is a large. It was the number one most surprising thing to me when I started my show, is that I had to learn how to have a conversation. Yeah. It was just surprising. I was just figured, like, I was so focused on all the technical details and the name of the show and the equipment and getting everything dialed in, and then I hit record on my first episode, and I was like, so
and that's great, by the way, and I love it.
Yeah.
So I'm not knocking the format. I love the format. I was one of the early adopters.
Yeah, right. And now you've been able to not just have a podcast, but to excel to kind of top charts for all the different various mediums now that you're choosing.
Yeah, it's a competitive world. I mean, I'm blessed, to be a part of a massive machine that gets me a lot more eyeballs and ears than people who start out from scratch. So Ramsey Solutions has been, nothing but a blessing to me. But I mean, it's a very competitive world.
Yeah.
And it's now a part of the normal business model.
Right.
You
We
know?
were just talking with the crew a little bit before we hit record, and talking about how people are dubbing this election as the podcast election. And it's always interesting to look at political marketing, because political marketing is just a forecast into the future of what business marketing is going to be. If you look at, all the way back to JFK and now up to Barack Obama on Facebook, and then now this election with Trump and JD Vance doing just a large swath of podcasts, and then the other side doing virtually none, and then you see the results happening. It's here to stay, I think.
Yeah, and keep in mind on that, politics is downstream of culture. So it's not surprising to me. I was chuckling seeing all these stories.
Same.
The only reason that this happened is because the president's got a teenage son who was like, Dad, you should
all
probably
the attention
go
is
over
here. Yeah.
Because politics is downstream of culture. In other words, it always is the last thing. So like the political class, the ruling class, they're always the last ones to jump on something.
Right.
And so podcasts obviously have been huge for a while. It's just the first election cycle where we've seen,
Other people
the actual
realize it.
candidates go, oh, we're going to treat this just like we would a 60 Minutes interview.
Right. Well, when you start realizing the numbers that they can get in front of by sitting in a room like this with 0 people watching versus the insane tour schedule that they would do to fly across the country to do an in-person rally with 6,000 people or something like that. It's like, but there's 1 million people that are going to listen to this episode.
And that's what I love about podcasts and YouTube. It has democratized media. And that is great. That's huge.
It was wild to me watching the commentary post-election for people that were just shocked. I don't know how many times I would hear somebody say something like, apparently this Rogan fan base is real. It's like, you're just figuring that out?
Yeah, it's
That's
nonsensical.
wild. That's like so out of touch, because you're so far deep into the traditional media machine that you can't just recognize that the majority of people's attention is elsewhere.
Yeah. Well, this is a great point to make. It's a big world. And I think we would all do well to remind ourselves as much as possible how big the world is and how small we are and our frame of reference is. And that's a great example of it, is, those kind of comments that seem ludicrous to us, and yet not surprised by it. Because again, the more myopic, the more you got blinders on to the world around you, the more isolated your mindset becomes. So you say stupid things like that.
And then you're developing a new show now, right?
Yeah.
So you're always constantly looking at new ideas. Where did this one come from? Why start a new show?
Well, for a couple reasons. Number one, when I first launched the Ken Coleman Show at Ramsey, it was almost an emergency.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's a fun story. I was on vacation with my family, and I get a call from one of our executives here, and he says, "Hey, you got a minute?" I said, "Yeah." He goes, "You might want to sit down for this one." And it felt ominous, but he was like, "This is potentially great news. Don't get too excited because it's not a done deal." And then I was like, "Okay, what are we talking about?" And he had just come out of a meeting where Dave had been meeting with SiriusXM, and SiriusXM wanted to do a Dave Ramsey channel. And so when you got a channel, you got to fill the channel.
Sure.
Well, we had personalities at the time. I'd just been announced as a personality to help people win at work. But I had a lot of hosting duties, and so I was training a guy to replace me, and David said, take 6 months, transition this thing out, dive in deep on your content, your methodology, take your time. And then a month later, I get this call. And in the same meeting that I'm talking about, Dave said to our team, Coleman, because he knew I could do radio.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've been doing radio for 4 or 5 years, so he knew I could do it. And he said, and I was the only personality with radio experience, and the only personality that had done it every day.
Yeah.
So he was like, give Coleman an hour-long show right before me each day. So that's a massive opportunity.
Yeah, right.
So they were like, what do you want to do? And I was like, sure, I'll do it. And I was like, how much time do we have to develop the show? And I was like, it's going to start in 2 months. And we got to hire a producer. We got to do a lot. And Dave just wants you to take calls. So just get in there and take calls. So there was no There was no creative process.
Sure. There was no
not,
like, what do I want to do? How do we make it happen? Yeah.
But at the same time, I'm not griping about that.
Right. No, yeah. You
I'm
got to seize the opportunity for sure.
Yeah, 100%. This is a dream come true. A literal dream to have a national show on Sirius XM. So I was like, God, yes, amen, thank you, let's do it. So there is so we got in, got going, then about a year or so later, we moved into traditional radio, we syndicated, but it was a radio show first. Even though it was Sirius XM, it still worked on a kind of traditional clock, and then we syndicated on about 80 stations.
Okay.
Well, so while that's happening, podcast continues to grow. YouTube becomes a major player, and we're now going, okay, we got to be on those platforms, but we're a radio show first and foremost. So how do you take a traditional radio show that's got 4 breaks in the hour, 8-minute segments, now you got to cut those commercials out, make it a podcast, then you got to put it on YouTube.
Yeah.
And then, so the format of radio was limiting our growth on these other formats.
Oh, yeah. Interesting.
Okay, that's one. 2, what we found is the show was an emergency room. In other words, people would call in who were struggling professionally in a really tough place. I would help them, and then the audience that was listening would listen. I would help them, and we saw people coming in, but a lot of people leaving. In other words, we helped them, and we did all these surveys, and they were like, man, Ken helped me a lot, but
peace,
I'm out.
Yeah, right.
It was an emergency room.
Yeah.
And so you look at those 2 key factors, the writing was on the wall that we had a lid on the show, and we reached that lid. And I love that you asked me this. I love talking about this because this is what a lot of people don't do. They're afraid to adapt. They're afraid to look at the realities and go, hey, this was great. It was a lot of fun, and but it's limited.
Yeah.
Well, I don't want to be limited. So brought this up to leadership, and they agreed, and I said, we've got to be able to program to the platform. And so traditional radio is not going up. Traditional radio is going down. So that's the impetus for the new show. But the new show is something that I have been kicking around for a long time.
Yeah, I want to jump into that, but really quickly, I want to glaze over this one thing. I think this is a massive lesson that I've taken away recently. When I first started the show, it was all about consistency. It was just like consistency. I used to say like painful consistency. Just if you're not consistent till it hurts, then you're doing something wrong. Right.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I would watch in real time people around me who had shows even longer than I did that started their podcast 2012, 2013, 2014. And they would remain consistent, but that clearly was not the only factor. The show would never grow. And it was like, well, it's clearly not just about consistency, to your point about being able to be flexible, being willing to pivot. It's about consistency combined with improvement and introspection. And then those things over time will increase overall. But if you're just consistent, like it basically just taught me that consistency is just the barrier to entry. It's just the thing that gets you in the door. You have to remain consistent. It's not an option. However, from there, if you're not consistently improving, then you can just wind up doing, it's that the person's got, 1 year of experience, 30 years in a row type of a thing. It's like, well, you're not doing anything though. You got to learn and improve and do better than the last time.
That's right.
Or else consistency is just a waste.
And I think that, so for me, it was like, it's okay to say, hey, this was for a season, this was the right move. And it was. Yeah. Right? It would have been, if I look back on it, it'd been silly for me to go, no, Dave, I don't want to do that. Because what comes out of it? What comes out of it is I learned how to coach people in a very short amount of time. And so now I sit here and I've coached over 10,000 people in 6 to 8 minutes. Wow. So I have developed some true super skills that I would not have had. Yeah. That play into the bigger picture.
And I watched, I came out here for an influencer event a few months ago.
Oh, yeah.
And my biggest takeaway was just like, man, Ken is a master at interviewing because they put you on the stage to interview basically all the people that were there for the influencer event on their topic. But obviously you didn't have any prep work you were literally just like looking at a topic that they submitted 3 minutes before, and then you have a panel of 3 people who you don't know anything about, and then you had to immediately come up with interesting questions to ask them on the spot with little prep time, nothing to do, and it was just very clear that's like, this guy's been doing this for a little bit.
Yeah, thank you. Well, yeah, and I've always loved. I mean, that's how I broke into broadcasting, was by doing interviews at this Catalyst conference, starting the Catalyst podcast, teaching myself how to do interviews. Never took a class, never went to school for it. And so I take the craft really serious, and I enjoy it.
Yeah.
And so Front Row Seat is the evolution of my journey, but it's also a creative version of stuff that's influenced me. So there's nothing new under the sun. And so anybody who's old enough to get this math will totally get it. If you're not old enough to get this math, you could go look it up and you'll go, oh, so what is Front Row Seat? Well, the math on it is Inside the Actor's Studio meets Masterclass meets MTV Unplugged. That's the feel.
Yeah.
And so I've been influenced. You've been influenced. Every musician that's ever written a song has been influenced by other artists that all pour into that creative output.
Yeah.
And so this show is designed to not just bring in an audience and a broader audience, but also to keep them coming back. And, you know, you know this, by the way, at some point, every show hits some type of a plateau. And so it's not about honestly, I'd be really shocked if even the top podcast or top YouTube shows are just growing incrementally at large rates. I'd be shocked. I don't think that's happening.
Yeah.
But are they bringing in new people, and are they keeping a large chunk of those people? That's the game.
Sure. Yeah. Retention is difficult.
Yeah. And so, you know, it's like I said, it's a big world and a lot of people out there.
Yeah.
You know, so for anybody trying to get into this game of podcasting or YouTube, you know, look, it can't just be about the numbers. Do numbers matter? Yes. But it's got to be about what are you doing with that audience?
Yeah.
And that's all about what are you doing for the audience.